Hey, White Sox fans, guess what? My name is Brett Ballantini. I'm hosting the Southside Sox on the farm, down on the farm, whatever. It has something to do with the farm podcast, number 17. It's been 3 weeks. Did you miss us? Oh, I know you did. I promised them like every week, maybe like 2 a week, and we were off for a while. I figured out why. It doesn't have to do with the fact that we were supposed to do a podcast tonight celebrating the White Sox clinching the division. Didn't happen. But you know what? I just now found out breaking news. Darren Black has abandoned the Chicago White Sox as his franchise. Check it out. If you're watching, Oakland A's fan. Can you believe this? Oakland A's. Oakland Athletics, Kansas City Athletics, Philadelphia Athletics. He's an elephant man now. What can we say? He's an elephant man. So I did manage to, it took some cajoling. I did manage to get him back onto the podcast. He's going to pretend he still cares about the White Sox, and we're going to run through the system a bit. I'll summarize what we're going to do here on this podcast in a second. But Darren, welcome. Appreciate you gracing us with a little bit of your time, seeing as how you're a West Coaster now.
Yeah, I've always been a big Eddie Collins fan and Frank Thomas fan, so I was alive for both of them. So
yes, it's
fantastic hat.
It's only fair. And also, you figure it can't beat them, join them every trade the White Sox make. With the A's, we lose. So, hey, go with where.
Oh, yeah. And Tony La Russa fan. Almost forgot.
Oh, God. Who can forget? That was just a given, Darren. Just a given.
Oh, and Jose Canseco. Oh, my God. So many overlaps.
There are a lot of connections. So maybe, if you have a spare hat, maybe I'll wear one next time. We are on number 17. Again, we were off for a few weeks. Well, little things happen, like the one playoff team not making the playoffs. The season ending for 4 affiliates. And I think that's basically what we're going to center this podcast around. We're going to take a look at 4 of those teams, 2 still playing, of course, at the very bottom. Dominican Summer League team still playing because you're devoted readers of the nightly updates. And of course, AAA Charlotte, though they're playing for nothing, they are actually technically still playing. You might not know it, but they are actually still playing there in Charlotte. So the middle 4, the meat of the sandwich, we are going to discuss. We're going to run through sort of briefly here, Darren and I. We're going to talk about things that have surprised us. It's going to be players more than likely, but with which each of those teams, a bit of an overview. In coming weeks, we do plan on drilling down a little more deeply into each team to whatever degree they are worthy of it. But, we'll go maybe get into a little more detail about most of the guys on each roster having had all the seasons wrapping up. Darren, I rarely get questions asked of me on these podcasts, and I think I figured the reason why out, and that is because I don't really know much. But you know what? I'm going to jump to the head of the line. I'm going to answer our question first. Okay. We're going to start with Birmingham. And the surprise, I think it was already alluded to, but the surprise that I have with Birmingham is the fact that they didn't make the playoffs. Darren, it's not exactly 1964 Phillies or the 1978 Boston Red Sox, but this is a team that basically could have fallen, just tripped into the playoffs. They went 0-4 to finish the season. The Montgomery Biscuits, I believe, who caught them head-to-head, went 6-0 to finish the season. And then on top of it, Darren, another surprising aspect of this is how it ended up happening. Montgomery moved a half game ahead of Birmingham in a rain-shortened, delayed win. I think it was only 7 innings. Mm-hmm. And then I believe it was supposed to be a doubleheader the next day. Maybe it was just a single game. I'm not sure. Yeah, but that just got completely banged. And so essentially Montgomery, not even a division winner, falls into the playoffs. Birmingham, who really thought I have to figure they thought it was in the bag, had a really good season, but then somehow ends up falling a half game short of the playoffs. And I think, even though we haven't talked in a while, I think 3 weeks ago we would have said it'd be pretty surprising if Birmingham doesn't make the playoffs. And lo and behold, they did not make the playoffs.
Yeah. So they still won their division, but because of when the season started, COVID, well, I guess COVID's bad again, but when the season started, we were coming off this huge wave. And so they were like, well, are there even going to be playoffs? Who knows? Right. So they were just like in the middle of the season, I think they just said top 2 teams, regardless of whether they win the division, make the playoffs. And yeah, so it came down to percentage points. I think the Barons played fewer games than the Biscuits. But yeah, the Barons lost 4 straight. All they needed to do was win 1, and they didn't. And then going into, it was this past Sunday, I believe they would have needed to win both games to advance in the doubleheader, but they didn't even play the doubleheader because it got rained out, both of them. And they were holding out for a long time because I was doing the minor league update, and they were holding out for a good 5 hours before they even decided to get rid of the game. And then they were like, yeah, there's no point. So the Barons basically conceded the division because of rain at the end.
So it wasn't a home cooking rain out like that Saturday one where it's like, oh, well, so we got enough innings in. Let's just, let's take the lead in the division, or let's take the lead in the playoffs. White Sox, seriously, we're not joking. White Sox do not take a cue from the Barons. White Sox. Let's just wrap this thing up. Yes, that would be like it would be worse than the 1964 Phillies or 1978 Red Sox. So White Sox, don't do this.
I think, what was it, the 2010 Sox that had that 3-game lead with 2 weeks left and then like won 2 games and 10 of the season? I think
got to witness that firsthand, Darren. Okay, I'm assuming you're not going to pick like the team bus. You're actually going to pick a player. I think I can figure out who the good surprise might be, but why don't you lay a good and bad surprise on us from the Barons season this year, Darren?
Yeah, so the good, I tried to stick with, guys that actually deserve to get props, not like a couple years older guys that are not, so Romy Gonzalez, that was pretty easy. Like he had his best career. He had his best year ever. He made it all the way to the big leagues from AA when no one was expecting that he would even leave AA this season.
Yeah.
So you kind of have to go him. He showed a lot more pop than, anybody thought. And it might have not looked as good if he was an outfielder, but now he's a shortstop that's hitting 20 homers a year in the minors. But it is probably more difficult to hit homers in Birmingham than maybe just thinking Park than anywhere else in the White Sox organization. And he made it all the way to the bigs. He didn't really play a ton with the White Sox, struck out a ton, but got a decent amount of hits, got a lot to prove in major leagues, but he's proved no one would have been expecting that heading into 2021. So thumbs up surprise. Thumbs down surprise is a little bit of it's surprising the fact that he was promoted and then did so terribly to end the season. It was Jason Below.
Yeah, right.
However, we still don't really know his name. Which now that I know Jason Benetti says Romy Gonzalez, now I'm sticking with that. So no more Rami for me. But
okay.
For Jason B, he did really, really well with the Winston-Salem dash. Only really lasted like a few starts, striking out a ton of guys, not walking. Both of those numbers went down. Strikeout or walks went up too much for him, and Ks, though still high, went down, which is not a good combination to do well. You can say, well, the expected stats in fifth looked better, but still not where you want someone that you were hoping could get to the majors one day would be. I think this season pretty much takes out the fact that he's going to be a starter going forward. I would expect him to be a reliever to see if they can get anything more out of him next year. Maybe start him in Winston-Salem again as a closer or what have you, and then see how well he does and then move him up quickly if he keeps doing well. But I think this year sank his chances to be a starting pitcher in the majors. So got to give a thumbs down to Jason B. while giving the thumbs up to Romy Gonzalez, sorry.
Oh man, it's going to be hard to have you. Listen, I thought, come on, you're the expert. I was deferring to you there for a while, but in the back of my head, I thought it just can't be. It just can't be. And
Romy sounds better.
The thing that's tough about Belaus, Jason B is we're desperate. We're hungry to be able to really promote and get hyped. It'll be interesting to see if there's even a good surprise anywhere pitching wise in the system, in the sandwich teams of the system, because I mean, we're hungry for it. He wouldn't have had to, I guess what I'm trying to say is he wouldn't have had to really do backflips for us to be like, okay, sort of promising. Hey, let's see what he does in Charlotte. And he really did sort of flame out. I will offer, in addition to the team, I'll offer a guy who's sort of like both a bad and good surprise. Shout out to Tommy Barbie. It's Micker Adolfo, because obviously on the good end, he delivered his best power season, certainly home run season. He got promoted to Charlotte in a sort of delayed promotion. But of course, the bad side is it's too little too late, for Micker and the White Sox. It just doesn't seem like there's any way that marriage can last into 2022. It does bode well for his career somewhere, I think, to have this season under his belt, despite clearly some real holes still in his game. Somebody out there needs to give him a shot. But tell me this, we talked about this a little bit, Darren, and this is what the podcast is for, is just to teach Brett things. So we've talked about the fact that the reasons why it's very slim chance Micker sticks with the Whites, essentially has to make the team out of spring training and basically not get sent down all season, which is just highly improbable, despite the gaping hole in right field and the fact that 60 guys in the outfield were injured last year. Okay, so let's pretend it's a normal year or whatever. But here's the thing. Okay, say he's DFA'd, Pirates claim him, Pirates put him on major league roster. Then what happens? If Pittsburgh wants to demote him because he's doing poorly or whatever, is he on waivers again? Is he just perpetually on waivers? And at what point is he not on waivers ever?
He has to never be sent down again, or he'll always be, I guess technically you're not being DFA'd at that point because you're still on the 40-man roster. But I'm not even sure. I'm not a huge roster guru guy, so I'm not sure what the actual waivers are called in that instance.
Okay.
Because again, you're not being DFA'd. Maybe it's revocable waivers. I'm not sure. But whenever he gets sent down, he will always be on waivers to be claimed, because he has no more option years. He was a young guy coming up. Again, they signed him when he was 17, so that clock starts right when he starts playing. And he's now at the point where he's been on the 40-man for 3 years, or maybe 2, and he can't be demoted anymore, because each time the season starts and you're on the 40-man, you're demoted when you're not on the major league roster.
Right.
So he just doesn't have any more options. So next year, if he doesn't make the Sox, he'll be demoted. Maybe someone will grab him. Someone probably will grab him, but he'll always be on that limbo.
So next year for him, he's in a scenario where he could end up finding himself jumping from team to team. Now, at the end of next year, then he's a free agent. And so from there, teams will say, I'm going to sign you a minor league deal, major league deal, whatever. But then it's a different deal. Because right now we're talking about the very end of his team control. So that's the transition we're talking about, going into like from 20 to 22 to 23.
So I don't believe that's his team control, because I don't think his arbitration years have started.
Okay, that's true.
I think you have to actually play X amount of games.
This guy isn't going to be a free agent until he's 48 years old.
Yeah, which is why when people now that the Cubs have some pretty good 30-year-old rookies, people are like, well, team control till he's 36 or 37 because they don't have enough MLB service time. But the Sox had that problem with Yermin Mercedes. Now we don't really know what's going to happen with him,
right?
Because he didn't end the season very well in AAA, and B, doesn't have a position. C, he kind of was
a lot of stuff.
Not nice.
A lot of stuff. And meanwhile, the t-shirts are piling up in the Southside Sox stock room. Okay. So we spent a lot of time on Birmingham. Apologies, podcast audience, but you love us and you're getting your money's worth. You're getting your money's worth. Okay. Let's move down to Winston-Salem. I have a ready answer, but I'm not going to give it because you're probably going to cover it. Give me some surprises for the Winston-Salem Dash, who, by the way, I think I inserted this into one of your updates because I just got suddenly very curious, and Lord knows I wanted to stay up even later editing. And I did look up, and I want to say at some point they were 17 and 15, and essentially they lost more at a rate of more than 2 out of 3 the rest of the season. They just, after about what would that be, a third of the season, a quarter of the season, they just tanked as bad as anyone in the organization. Sort of a sad season for the Dash. Give me some surprises.
Yeah, the Dash probably had the weakest team in terms of prospect value. They had a lot of guys that you could say like, oh, like, yeah, Yoelqui Cespedes was there eventually. Jose Rodriguez is there at some point. So it's like, oh, you've got two of the top guys there, but it was just those two, and those guys either started in Kannapolis and came late and then moved again, or Yoelqui was kind of thrust forward. But in terms of surprises, again, there's not a lot of prospect capital. So the guy that personally surprised me was Gilbert Sanchez. Unfortunately, he didn't surprise me when he was with the Dash. He did just so well with the Barons that I was like, whoa, if you're improving from your high A stats to double A stats, that's something to take notice and take watch for the future. And now he's also going to be in the Arizona Fall League. So the Sox definitely saw like, hey, prove that to me against better competition later on this season.
And we talked about that a little, Darren, already, and I think it'll come up again with other prospects at some point. The idea that he almost got this, like, well, you're so old, you have to go to Birmingham, and then he gets to Birmingham. I think we made a comparison. We talked about it with Gonzalez. Is wait, you're killing it at a tougher level when you haven't necessarily even proven at the lower level that you're like keeping your head above water, and that's the kind of stuff that really makes your eyes open. And I think that's what put Sanchez sort of back. I guess he never fell off, but really back on the prospect list, not just because the system sucks so badly, but because he deserves to have a little bit of to be on the list with a bullet, because this has been a massive redemption season for him because the offense is sort of there suddenly.
Yeah, so the way he played in Double A is the way that kind of, if you looked and projected out his stats to be like, he needs to be this type of player to be successful with the White Sox, the season he had in Double A is basically where he needs to be. Again, he's not a power guy, a little too short, not too heavy for that. But he is a guy that has fantastic bat to ball skills. Again, not like Nick Madrigal. Nick Madrigal is out of this world with bat to ball skills. He's not at that level, or he'd be with the White Sox if he was at that level. They wouldn't have traded for Cesar Hernandez.
Right.
But so the walks fell, but also the strikeouts fell. And so if he's swinging the bat that often and getting on base still, again, they're probably going to be singles mostly. But for a guy like that, you just kind of want him to dink the ball around everywhere and just not strike out. Again, I'm not expecting him to come to the majors and have a 200 hit season. I'm still thinking utility infielder when it all comes down. But if you're thinking how Lieri played this season, hitting, I don't know, like, what is he, like 260, 270 at this point with a little pop, great defense. That's what Gilbert Sanchez should be able to provide. And if you're coming on as a pinch hitter hitting, I mean, he's probably not going to hit 340 in the majors, but if he's hitting 280 in majors as a pinch hitter or as a kind of a platoon second baseman, whenever we get to that point of who the next second baseman is, like, that's a fantastic guy to have in your bench. And so that's what I'm thinking his future is. And we'll know more in the Arizona Fall League if he's still successful there.
Who's on a team that I think won approximately 0 games the last 2/3 of the season? Who stood out as the biggest disappointment to you, Darren?
So half of this, half of it is because of injury, but also just kind of the oddness of how long he was out for and not really much information. It was Bryce Bush. Again, still has that prospect luster had it coming into the season from his little, like, fantastic Arizona, I guess it was AZL at that point, season once he was drafted out of high school, which is great. Guy gets out of high school, does really well, and then gets actually promoted from that point. That's good. 2 thumbs up. But he has just tanked it since. Hasn't really shown anything. Defense was always a problem, and they were trying to figure out where to put him. They finally decided outfield, like they do with everybody else. And it just didn't work out. Again, he's coming off injuries, he was injured this season, so he could easily bounce back. But it's just a trend of him not performing well and getting injured and not performing well enough to deserve to be back. So he's kind of in limbo. Hopefully he doesn't turn into an Alec Hansen situation where he's like, remember that guy was that good? But that's kind of the trajectory that he's taken.
Hey, Darren, at least Alec Hansen's playing. I mean, better or worse,
he is
he's playing.
It might be for worse for the Barons.
Bryce Bush, you were like, I was like, oh my God, I forgot about Bryce Bush. So
yeah, like he had a weird game with the Arizona Complex League this one time, and then he just wasn't seen ever again.
Darren, it was just Bryce's turn to keep the book. So he got activated for the one day, he kept the book, and then he was back rehabbing. All right, we're going to take a break, and who knows? Darren sent me some breaking news with it's probably been out for 3 weeks about the Arizona Fall League, but I think when we come back, we're going to talk a little Arizona Fall League very briefly, like maybe if there's any more names. And then we're going to talk about the 2 lowest rung teams who actually have their season finished. We're going to do that right after our little break in, I don't know, either a second or a minute. Okay, it was either a second or a minute, but we're back with Southside Sox Down on the Farm podcast. Number 17, I think it's number 17. We wanted it to be podcast number, 60 odd something, celebrating, popping champagne, everybody be drunk on camera. But it didn't happen. White Sox, what are you doing to us? White Sox, come on. We got to, now I'm not even counting on it tomorrow. Now it's going to be like some kind of Thursday thing because they're going to play 16 games on Thursday. So God
they'll win tomorrow, but also Cleveland will win. So then they have to keep extending.
It could very well be. But we have been talking about the 4 teams in the White Sox system, all the sandwich teams in the middle, not the DSL or Charlotte AAA that have finished their seasons, including Birmingham, who, boy, if you didn't hear it, rewind, listen to the first half, because what a catastrophic finish for the Birmingham Barons, a team we love, a front office we love, players who have even fed the White Sox this year, for God's sake. So, man, Birmingham, what are you doing? Okay, wait. Because I'm asleep half the time, waking hours, because I'm a vampire, I haven't heard anything about the Arizona Fall League, other than the fact that they are starting, I think, October 14th. There's no schedule yet, I don't believe. But apparently there are some players, including Gilbert Sanchez. Do you have any other players, Darren Black, breaking news, even if it's been sitting around for a couple of weeks?
So this is from a James Spigen tweet from September 20th. It's Yoelqui Cespedes, Jose Rodriguez, Gilbert Sanchez. Those are your position players. Then pitchers are Caleb Freeman, JB Olson, McKinley Moore, and Johan Dominguez. So they've got 7 guys going. Unfortunately, not really any of the starting pitchers we thought maybe would have deserved an AFL appearance at the beginning of the season deserved it, and they did not go, even if some seasons were shortened by injury. But decent group of guys there, including probably 2 of the best relievers in the system, in Caleb Freeman and McKinley Moore. Obviously, all the eyes are going to be on Jose Rodriguez, though.
And JB Olson, who apparently just had his name picked out of a hat because they needed a 7th guy, which that's an interesting one. Okay, well, thank you for that. And thank you, James Spigen, by association. I had missed that. So thank you for breaking that to me. Again, these podcasts are all, I'm sorry, listeners. It's not about you. It's about just me learning. It's about me learning how to be an Oakland A's fan, because apparently Darren Black has turncoated us and he is now in the Bay Area, repping Jose Canseco and Tony La Russa's and the Bash brothers. It was before his time. But he's always dreamed of rooting for the Bash brothers. So, all right, your steroids are in the mail, Darren. That will be your payment for this podcast. Okay, let's talk about, where are we at? We're at low A. Low A, Kannapolis. The most hilarious team in the system. God bless you, Kannapolis. And actually, probably if you take a certain frame like September, or at least, I don't know, last 2/3 of the season, they're probably actually maybe better than Winston-Salem. But wow, ballyhooed, and by all accounts, terrific new park, new name, new logo, new mascot, new this, new that, probably new snacks at the ballpark. And wow, you couldn't whoopee cushion a season worse than the Kannapolis Cannonballers did. That said, a couple real hitting stars. Lay at least the good news. If you could come up with somebody, lay it on me, Darren.
Yeah. So obviously, I'm not sure. Yeah, he's probably the biggest surprise, just that he went to AA. Jose Rodriguez. He did pretty well in Kannapolis. He mainly had a really good first month of the season, and then kind of was the same player after that. Would show some power sometimes, never really slumped ever. And when I say never slumped, like he really didn't. He'd never had an extended period where he was bad, which was probably the most remarkable part of his time in Kannapolis. But then he went to the dash and he just hit all the time. It started out as a lot of singles. And I remember being worried about that. I'm talking about remembering like it's 10 years ago. It was last month.
Well, to be honest, Darren, you were a White Sox fan back then. So it does seem like it's
true. Yeah, it was that long ago. Yeah, but he, and then his last week and a half, maybe two, he started showing that gap power. And I've talked on here before, but you really just got to see his swing. His swing screams 20, 25 homers, maybe 30 if he adds some weight. And obviously he's only 20 years old, so he has plenty of time to kind of fill out his frame. But his swing is vicious. And somehow he actually doesn't strike out a ton, which is very impressive. Didn't really play a ton in AA, so I don't even really want to talk about his stats because it was 4 games, didn't look great, but still fantastic for the whole entire season, wherever he was. Just really surprising.
And I'm sure if you're a fan of the Tampa Bay Rays, they have like one of these guys everywhere. Other game. But the fact that this guy, and again, defensively, let's forget the fact he literally at this point has no position on the field, but that, he's 20. Okay. We can cool it on that. But we just talked about Gilbert Sanchez, but he took what Gilbert Sanchez did and like quadrupled it. The fact that he just like his eyes got wider with every level he moved up. And as you're pointing out, the power came. It's truly extraordinary. And it's so exciting to be able to talk about a guy that really makes you go, hold on a second. Like you got to rewind the at bat to watch it again. Because the White Sox, baseball teams don't have that many guys. And certainly the White Sox, even after this last, flush of talent up to the major leagues, I don't know how many of those guys necessarily qualify in the Jose Rodriguez 2021 category. Let's hope the guy can sustain it. But man, it looks like it goes from, hey, prospect we sort of liked. Some of us were hyped about him, but even me sort of being a little hyped on was like, well, who else is there? I sort of like him, to like, holy cats, this guy
you
could
gotta
be
pay attention.
Yeah, big time. So, hey, Darren, on the Kannapolis Cannonballers this year, were you surprised by anyone's poor performance?
Poor performance. Was there anybody I wasn't surprised?
Oh, that's the oddest answer.
So you could pick out a bunch of people, but the fact that it's become more of a debate of who the better prospect is, Jose Rodriguez or Jared Kelley, says both fantastic things about Rodriguez and awful things about Kelley. Because this is supposed to be Kelley's coming out, obviously his first season. He got an aggressive placement and just totally fell flat on his face for the entire season. He kept showing some bright spots, to say it nicely, but most of the time it was really bad command, which we knew when he was coming out. Coupled with injuries, he got hit a ton. He was striking out people at a decent rate if you were in the majors, but just slightly over 1 per 9 innings is not good for a top prospect in your system, or the top prospect in your system. That's not good enough. And he also was walking basically the same amount as he was striking out. Next season is going to be huge for him. From everything that I've read from people that were there and timed his stuff looked fine. It looked like the guy that was drafted. He just couldn't pitch. Whether he was injured and literally couldn't pitch, or he was on the mound and was walking too many people or getting too deep into counts. And that really hampered himself down the stretch, because he had a ton of games where he just was throwing 30 pitches in the first inning and then either was pulled that inning or pulled fairly quickly in the second because he walked the first guy.
Right.
Just really an abysmal first year.
Let's broaden the disappointment a bit and say before the season, if you'd said the reason why Kannapolis was going to win their division, because they were the most hyped team in this system, would it be because of the offense or the rotation? You would have said the rotation. So I'm going to broaden my answer to say not just Jared Kelley, but also Matthew Thompson and Drew Dahlquist being this sort of hyped trio that really was supposed to kill. And really maybe aside, I know they all had their moments. Dahlquist and Thompson seemed to finish strong. I think at least 2 strong starts to finish, which is good. It's what you want. Just a disappointment, given that was supposed to be the anchor, maybe the best soul-like position in the whole system. I know it's sort of broad to call starting rotation a position, but and for them to, well, they're terrible, and not that they're the reason why Kannapolis finished like 28 and 300, but a big reason why. I mean, they completely their parachute had a hole in it, and Thompson got his bearings. I'm not really sure how. I don't think Dahlquist did quite as well, even down the stretch at the end of the season. I know they had their moments, but for that trio to have failed so badly, not one guy take the next step and sort of be a star, even if maybe the other 2 faltered or spun their wheels a little bit. Extraordinary disappointment to me. As for good surprises, let's just acknowledge some guys who have been, as you've been really great in doing all year, who've been sort of in Jose Rodriguez's shadow. First and foremost, I think Brian Ramos, really terrific year he had. So. Luis Mieses, who, sort of like went up and down a little bit. And, to some degree also Harvey Mendoza, although I think Mieses has maybe a better all-around player profile, given that he's a defender. Some guys in the midst, both in the shadow of an awful season and Jose Rodriguez. When you're playing with Popeye, you're going to be in the shadows. Everybody's a Bluto or a Sweet Pea next to Popeye. So, but still some bright moments, not reflected in the record, but there were some rays of sunshine hitting Truist Field or whatever the heck it is, a new ballpark there. Let's move down. The very short season, they're already done. DSLs, they're looking at Arizona like, why are we still playing? And those guys who are already stateside are already done. Forget about this. But the complex league, the complex White Sox, and believe me, they were very complex. They always are finished. They finished, I want to say, pretty strong. They were a little abysmal at the start, and they seemed to get a little bit of a
close
kick.
to 500. Yeah, second best record.
Yeah. Okay. Well, then, my random dumbass clueless hunch, though a Sox fan, clueless hunch. I'm supplanted once again by the Oakland Athletics fan. But there were some real bright spots, I think, all around, not just pitching or hitting, but there were some strong performances in that very, very short season.
Yeah, you could point to a lot of the 2021 draft picks that had a pretty decent season. Halen Green, probably foremost. I think he went 9 or 10 innings, didn't allow a run. But I try to stay away for this portion of it from the rookies because even if they didn't do well, I don't want to put a ton of stock in it because you're going from college or high school to playing the best of college and the best of the DSL. And even if they did really well, it's Halen Green, I think, is already 24. So that's not a huge surprise.
I don't want to interrupt you, Darren, but the proper, we always want to be good with style. Proper style is horned frog, Halen Green. But other than that,
I can't forget about the alliteration with horned frog, Halen Green. But so I started off with Misael Gonzalez, mostly because he was drafted in 2019 out of high school. The 2019 draft had a lot of high schoolers just in general drafted, and most of them didn't do so well. And then we were all excited for 2020 and then no season. And now here he is, and he just crushed it in the ACL, like crushed it enough to get promoted to Kannapolis. He wasn't as good in Kannapolis, not good really at all in Kannapolis, but was still showing a decent amount of pop, which was the surprising thing from his game. Because in 36 games, drafted out of high school, mind you, he no homers and only 5 extra base hits. And he went from this year to hitting 8 homers in about 52 games with 10 more extra base hits on top of that. So just a lot more power than we're used to seeing out of him. We'll first see where he's placed next season. I'm guessing Kannapolis. Still has a lot to prove, but he's just 20 still, so he's pretty young. He's just another guy to keep an eye on, along with Luis Maíz. Kind of similar-ish players, pretty toolsy, and if they put it together, it's guys that you definitely want to watch out for. And then on the bad, it is probably the most disappointing player in the White Sox system is Benjamin Bailey, because he went from just a fantastic 2019 Dominican Summer League, mind you. I've kind of been changing my tune on the DSL. I really think it's closer to college level playing instead of maybe a bit closer to an actual Arizona Complex League rookie where it's the best colleges. I think DSL is more like just normal,
Regular
maybe
college.
MAC baseball, something like that.
Right.
But because he, again, more walks than Ks, crushing it in DSL, and then he just totally, he still walked a decent amount, but his strikeouts doubled and sometimes tripled at times until he got it down in Kannapolis. But he really didn't earn another promotion from the ACL when he was demoted from Kannapolis. Was never really good this season at all. So we're left at the point where, right with Bryce Bush, are we just missing out on something that was fantastic, or was it all kind of an illusion from just a wacky kind of season? So next year is going to be big for him. Not really sure where he's going to start, because I guess maybe start in Kannapolis again, but maybe just be a bit more of a longer leash, since next year would be his age 20 season. So he's still not really that old, but very concerning.
I remember, Darren, at some point close to maybe a week before the trade deadline, I think a Pirates fan came on Southside Sox and was sort of talking like, hey, what could it do? I think he was talking at Adam Frazier, or whatever that guy's name is, went to San Diego and died, about a trade, and like, hey, what would a trade be? Cool discussion in that. And I remember in his package was, or a suggestion was, Benjamin Bailey. And I remember responding, because after all, I'm the expert, that there's no way the White Sox are going to trade Benjamin Bailey. It's too, whether it's too Tatis, whatever. There's just no way they're going to do it. And I think, the season's still young. He may have already been demoted, but come on, that's nothing. So what? But of course, literally like a week later, I thought to myself, well, yeah, they could have put him in that deal. Yeah. Given the fact that you would have maybe gone into the season, maybe into the season, considered like Jose Rodriguez and Benjamin Bailey, sort of someone equal of those blue chips. The fact that it just, you can't go in crazier directions there. Let me start with a negative guy for me. I have two names that you did not mention, so I'm happy about that. It makes me feel like I have a clue. But we talked about him, I think, in a podcast recently, and it's on the pitching side. It's a guy who lit up the DSL, Ronaldo Guzman, who I think steadied himself somewhat, but wow, just a really rough year. I can't speak to his performance as well as you, but tell me again, what happened there? Was it just an illusion because he was playing MAC competition in the DSL? Was that what it was, or is there something correctable going forward for him?
Well, there's certainly, I view every problem for a baseball player, unless they have the yips, or if it's something personal, emotional, something's going on that you just have to deal with outside of baseball, as fixable. Because the main thing that was Guzman's problem was just, it was just command. Like, he went from having, I remember Baseball America, I don't know if it was Ben Badler, it was somebody at Baseball America, was saying he's got an advanced changeup and advanced control for what he then was a 16-year-old, which maybe it just didn't improve. And now that he's older, it's really not that advanced anymore. But he went from DSL to the Arizona Complex League, and his walks doubled. He was still striking out, a fine number of guys, but the fact that his walks doubled that much, it is concerning, but it also is probably something that is maybe not easily fixable. But if you have a normal off season for the first time in your professional career, which we hope is this off season, he can kind of work with the White Sox guys and get his control back, because he was one of those guys that I was, keep an eye on him. Maybe he'll be around in 2025, because he's 16. He was 16, now he's 18.
He's going to be able to vote, drink, and then he'll join the White Sox. Perfect.
Yeah, it's a long ways away. Even if he was doing well, he still would have been a long ways away. But out of any of these probably bad guys that we've talked about, that's not, Jared Kelley, who could easily just fix itself because he throws 98. He probably is the guy that I would just, if I'm keeping my updates, I will probably keep him in there at the beginning of the next season and then have a little bit longer leash than I normally do. Like kind of how I did Alec Hansen a couple of years ago. It's just kind of, okay, well, he finally proved that he shouldn't be on here because he's not really relevant. And starting next year with Ronaldo Guzman, when in June or July, when the ACL starts, he'll be on there. And hopefully he's got his command down.
Okay, Darren, again, even though you have moved to the West Coast and abandoned our White Sox team, you're well aware that well, let's face it, I used to be the AZL whisperer. Now I'm the ACL whisperer. I whispered Jose Rodriguez. He turned into Popeye, and look at the year he had. So I'm going to pick a guy from the ACL who I'm truly amazed by. When I don't actually watch a lot of the guys, but I do read the box scores, and I stayed at a Holiday Inn Express or whatever that. Yeah, maybe that was the commercial everybody just listened to at midpoint. But when I looked at the box scores, I thought with not looking at position, I thought, okay, this guy's like a corner infielder. He's sort of mashing. He's stolen a couple of bases. This guy's I know you're not talking about rookies, so fine, but I will. Terrell Tatum, who has already been promoted. He's a center fielder, and he had me fooled into thinking he was like a first baseman with some of the, I don't know what his ISO was. Maybe it was 2. I don't know, but it seemed to me like he was mashing hell out of the ball in Arizona. Seemed to be doing pretty well, including stealing bases on a whim once promoted. For a guy who I don't think was even drafted, he certainly was not hyped in any way. I'm impressed.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he was an undrafted free agent, which obviously going from 40 picks to 20 picks means they're probably going to sign more of those guys. But yeah, he didn't show home run power, but he had the same amount of extra base hits as singles in the ACL, and had about a 170 ISO, which is pretty good for a guy like him. I'm not sure where he's going to end up eventually. He had a cameo in Winston-Salem. He did all right, but the things that jump out at me just from his really short time playing is it seems like he's got a lot of patience. Over 20% walks, which is Yasmani Grandal level, if you're trying to put a comparison to it. But obviously he's undrafted, so those guys are going to have to prove a ton before they go in front of anybody. Like, he was passed over for promotion to Kannapolis because that outfield is full of guys that really weren't playing well and just needed to get at bats and end the season. So they don't think he's better than anybody at low A right now, but if maybe he has a decent career like Ian Dawkins and then just keeps improving, I don't know. He's got some time, but just from his early stint, he's probably not gonna, be one of the released guys next year come June when all the draftees start coming.
Hey, Darren Black,
so good for him.
He can do what he wants to try and talk my guy down. It ain't happening. The Southside Sox hype train for Terrell Tatum is left the station. Okay, well, yeah, he is the guy who just stood out, and I think you could easily say Wilfred Veras, a guy who I believe came out of DSL, unbelievably mashing here as well. So I certainly don't want to overlook him. And the draft choices, the two top guys, they acquitted themselves pretty well. Copeland Montgomery sort of started slower than Westcott, but then I think he sort of got a little more legs. I think they pretty much, maybe by the end of the season, ended up, I don't want to say roughly the same, but maybe roughly the same. But I think decent for this, sneeze of hey, you're a professional now, go play baseball for a while type of shock. And I think it bodes well for the full season next year.
Yeah, I agree. Again, I don't like putting a ton of stock into rookies getting their first thing because we've already talked about they're better competition, but also it's the longest they've ever played baseball in their lives in terms of calendar year or the amount of games. So if I'm looking at Colson Montgomery, I see 0 homers and only 7 doubles. He's not a 0 homer guy. He'll be fine. He's probably lost a ton of power just because he's never played into September ever in his life. But the plate discipline looked good. Not putting a ton of stock in it, but it's always good when they do well, at least. And Sean Burke, another guy, probably one of their better pitchers they took. I think he actually got up to Kannapolis, if I remember correctly. And I mean, he was doing really well. Guy out of junior college, so a bit more advanced than Montgomery and Cass. But yeah, 2021 draft looks decent so far.
And you can't blame Colson. I actually did see some footage of him, and he would come into the batter's box, and he would either be, because of course all of you are watching, not listening to the podcast, so you can see my motions here. He would be doing a little bit of feinting. He would be doing the shuffle drill, or he'd actually be doing a jump shot motion. And that's because about this time, normally he's getting ready for basketball season. So just the fact he's still playing baseball has got to be even maybe a little weird to him. So we're going to cut him some slack for maybe completely vacating his power. And next year,
good thing, like the A's first rounder, they didn't lose Kyler Murray to another sport. So bring that
that's
back.
True. And yet
everything goes back to the A's.
And yet you're sticking with them. I mean, listen, I have to appreciate the dedication you've shown this team that you've been a lifelong fan of for the last 5.5 days, Darren. Listen, it's admirable. And if I had a hat on right now, I would tip it. I look forward to talking more with you sooner than 3 weeks from now, if only to see what hat you're wearing next. But we do plan on programming note, I guess, as we anxiously await for the White Sox to clinch the playoffs and sort of get to that next phase, because we've all been, it seems like the entire site has just been slumbering for a while. And yes, antsy, yet sort of like, I don't want to get too close. I do not want to do a podcast with Brett because I just want the playoffs to begin. Although be careful what you ask for, because apparently we might have no pitchers by the time the playoffs begin. But at any rate, for the minors, hey, listen, seasons are largely over, but the podcast isn't. We are going to be talking maybe more briefly than we did just now here, Darren, but we are going to drill down a little deeper into each team that's already done. I don't know when we're going to start that. Maybe we'll wait for the Charlotte season to be over, which is the same as the Major League Baseball regular season. So maybe that's coming in October. Maybe that's coming next week. I don't know. We're just winging it here. The White Sox haven't clinched, so maybe we won't have any playoff coverage. Who knows? But we will address Charlotte in great detail. We might start with Birmingham in great detail, the tragic fall of the Birmingham Barons. But we will get a little deeper into all of the rosters, in spite of how deep we already got into some guys. Now Darren's like, he's making notes like, okay, Terrell Tatum. Okay. Who are the other guys? Oh, I gotta scout Colson Montgomery's basketball moves. Okay. So, I mean, listen, I've given him some assignments. He's also juggling all his new A's guys. So, I mean, he's got a lot on his plate. So hopefully in a week's time, we did get off of the week schedule for the last couple, but hopefully in a week's time, we'll have at least maybe one of those roster previews. Maybe we will start with Birmingham, but we'll be talking minors at least in the near term. I don't know if this thing is going to go like all off season or not. Who knows? We'll have the fall league to talk a little bit about, because we're going to have to find out how great JB Olson does for the Glendale Desert Dogs, because we're all waiting for that. We'll have some things to talk about. Maybe we won't go every week, but I just got to find out who Darren is a lifelong fan of next. I gotta know, because he doesn't talk. The only time we talk is on these podcasts. And I get to catch up and can see how the family's doing, how the house pets are, and who he's rooting for, who he's got season tickets for. So apparently we know now, Southside Sox electorate and fan base, it is the Oakland Athletics. Maybe once they're eliminated from the playoffs, have they already been? Once they're eliminated from the playoffs, maybe it'll be a new team.
Yep. I'm going to go play with my dog, Connie Mack. I'll be right back.
Once he finally gets his steroid party pack through the mail via Canada, that Darren will finally have crossed that off his list, and he'll be able to move on to another team like Philadelphia Phillies. Who knows? Maybe it'll be Bryce Harper podcast number 18. Who's to say?
It's my favorite.
But thanks for hopping back on. It's not even a Monday, and you hop back on with me, Darren. I appreciate it. Good to catch up with you again. See how the family's doing. See how the diet's working out. Work, vehicle, whether it's got started up in this cold weather now. So good to catch up. Thank you, everybody, for, as always, reading, listening, sometimes even watching. We promise we will have 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, I don't know, something like that. We'll have plenty of those because we will be devoting podcasts to each one of the teams as sort of a wrap up sort of thing. And I'm sure we'll have a lot of pithy information for you that will make you laugh and make you wonder, geez, does Darren really have a dog named Connie Mack? Hey, tune in next week and you'll find out. Maybe you'll hear him barking. It'll be sort of an oldish bark, but it'll be very distinctive. I think I see him in the reflection of the window right there. So Darren, thanks for hopping on. Good to talk to you again. Good to see you again. And I look forward to seeing who you're rooting for in a week.
I'll be here.